Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Coding 101 is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This episode of Coding 101 is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the easiest way to create beautiful websites, blogs, or online stores for you and your ideas. Go to squarespace.com and enter the offer code C101 at checkout to get 10% off. And by HipChat. Collaborate, save time, and be more productive with your teams. HipChat is IM, video chat, plus file, code, and screen sharing all in one place. Invite your team members and get a free 30-day trial of the full version of HipChat at hipchat.com/C101. On this episode of Coding 101, we are petering off our Arduino embedded programming, so what better way to do it than by going for some Raspberry Pi? ISS Above is next. Welcome to Coding 101. It's the Twitch show where we let you into the wonderful world of the code monkey / code warrior. I'm Father Robert Balacer, the digital Jesuit, and I'm joined by my super special guest co-host, Mr. Lou Maresca. You've known him as a code warrior. He's back as a guest co-host. He is, of course, a software lead developer for Microsoft. Lou, thank you very much for coming back on to Coding 101.
Hey, Padre, thanks for having me again.
We've gotten kind of jiggy the last couple of weeks with Arduino. We got into embedded programming. We did our first ever crossover with Know-How. So if you've been watching the last 4 episodes of Know-How, you're also going to want to watch the last 2 episodes of Coding 101. I'm getting all confused here. You're going to want to watch the last 2 episodes of Know-How and the next 2 episodes of Know-How so you get the hardware and the software combined. Have you been doing any embedded programming projects yourself, Lou?
Yeah, actually, speaking of embedding, I've been messing with the Microsoft Band SDK just recently. Not Arduino, but I've been messing with the band stuff.
Ooh, and actually, you know, there is a nice little tie-in here. We're going to be talking a little bit about Raspberry Pi. Now, Raspberry Pi was the board that really kind of inspired a new generation of makers who had a very stable platform with a lot of power for very little cash. We are going to be playing with this Raspberry Pi, but the new Raspberry Pi made some news a while back because Microsoft announced that Windows 10 will be available in a version, a stripped-down command line version for that Raspberry Pi. Is that still going to happen?
Yeah, definitely. And then the interesting part is people thought, oh, Windows RT is dead. But if you think about it, it's just a variant of that. So that's why it's really interesting to see that they're actually doing this type of project.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because Microsoft's strategy is pretty obvious. They want Windows 10 in that RT-alicious format to be sort of the operating system for the Internet of Things. And actually, it's pretty dang good. It's a nice, secure system. It's very lightweight. It should run on the Pi just fine. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen once makers get that into their hands.
Exactly. Now you build with Windows Universal apps, so you could build it for both the Internet of Things and for your desktop apps. So now it becomes very cross-platform too.
Yeah. Well, let's not get too Microsofty because I actually want to talk a little bit about Java. We've had a lot of Java news the last couple of weeks, and we've had people who chastise us for conflating Java and JavaScript. Of course, they're not the same. But there is a few new Java pieces out in the programming world that people should probably be aware of. What's the first one, Lou?
So, you know, a lot of people have known that over the last couple of years when they install Java runtime, especially on their Windows machine, they get some applications, some additional applications, some additional options to install as well. A lot of people like to call them adware. But, you know, some people just like to call them toolbars and other additional applications. And they're normally not on by default. But just recently, Java's new runtime install, especially on Mac, is installing these, especially the Ask toolbar, which is a search toolbar, by default. And the problem is people are not really sure exactly what that toolbar does. They say that, oh, yeah, it's supposed to enhance your search and give you more relevant search. But, you know, between you and me, isn't that what Google and Bing do? So the question is really, what is this toolbar doing and why are they installing it by default right up front?
Right.
And They're doing some funny things with how they're bundling it too, so it's very strange.
You know, Lou, it's interesting because there's been a mini furor in the torrenting community because the latest version of uTorrent, if you download it buried in the EULA, I mean, they do tell you up front that it's going to use the unused cycles of your CPU to mine currency or to do problems. Basically, it says in exchange for giving you the software for free and allowing you to access the service, we're going to do something with your spare cycles. That's, you know, that was unheard of a while ago. And yeah, there's still a lot of people who are upset. But when you think about it, that's really what the toolbars do. At some point, they're using system resources to get information that they can monetize. And that's what uTorrent or Java is going to get out of it. They're going to get a kickback from the company that wants data, or they want clicks, they want viewers. There's something just strikes me really wrong about that.
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, Google and Bing, they get they get their ad data from, you know, the search that you actually make on their website. So there's no need to install something native on your PC. So when you install something native on your PC, to me, it's more evasive. It's more deeper down in the operating system because they can access a lot of things then from that perspective. I think that they should be telling you up front rather than saying, oh yeah, we give you more relevant search data than, or oh, by the way, we're also collecting, you know, all the traffic on the HTTP level protocol or something like that. Whatever they're doing, they should make it more prevalent so that people understand what's going on. But obviously that's kind of not what they're for. That's why this seems kind of strange to me.
Yeah, but okay, Lou, let me take the devil's advocate here, and that is, if I'm a programmer and I just want to get my app out there, I want to get my software out there, and it could be something for a mobile device, it could be for a desktop or a laptop, I'm going to consider the strategy, right? Because there's too much competition for me to charge for my app if nobody knows about it, so I'm going to give it away for free. But if I'm going to give it away for free, I still need to feed myself, so I'm going to consider looking for a third party, a partner who will monetize my installs. Isn't this the economy we live in? I mean, every programmer needs to consider this, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good way of doing it. But the problem is the way that they're doing it is they're not telling you about this. Now, most apps that you get for free, they say, hey, it's free, but there are going to be some ads in there, and they're not normally in the way, right? They're off to the side. They're not collecting additional data. If you click, it's more of a click-based ad type. Where they get credit if you click on it and do something. So I mean, it's a little bit less evasive than this. Now this is actually installing something on your PC. There's a runtime that runs outside of the Java runtime that kind of sits around for a while. There's a bunch of system files that are there. So there's one way of doing it where it's less evasive, and yeah, you can collect some data and you can make a pretty good amount of money. In fact, I know people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars on just click ads in their apps. Versus, doing something kind of strange and weird and under the covers. So, you can, this is one way to kind of get your app out there for free, but, don't do things secretly.
Yeah, and I think that's actually some great advice for anybody who's doing an Internet of Things, to have the tie back in, programming it, which is, if you are doing something with the Internet of Things, you will be collecting data. That's the whole idea of the Internet of Things. And so now we need to, as programmers, we need to figure out a way to tell people, I swear I'm going to be good with your data. I'm not going to misuse it. I'm going to be upfront with where it's coming from and where it's going to. I think that is one of the defining natures of the programming in Internet of Things world. Do you see much of that at Microsoft? Because I mean, it's different for you because you charge for your software, so you don't feel the need to bundle a bunch of junk in there. In fact, Microsoft goes through pains to try to make manufacturers not bundle stuff in with the OS. But what changes when you can charge for your software?
I think then it all depends. Like when you start to charge for your software, you get the anonymity or the autonomy to basically install whatever you want. And that's where most people don't want anything on their PC. So if you see like the Surface Pro, it has basically nothing on it, right? Just basic vanilla Windows, and that's it. And that really allows people to understand, oh yeah, I know what I'm getting and I know it's installed. And it might come bundled with maybe like a 30-day trial of Office or something like that, but at very little. But when you buy PCs from other retailers, they might install. Again, I think there were some recent manufacturers actually installing additional ad collection data on your machines that will open some security holes. So I mean, there's there's these companies that do these things by default when you get their PC, and they basically turn this beautiful piece of hardware into, you know, an ad machine, and then they get bad reviews on it. And it doesn't make sense to basically take your reputation down because of that. So be careful when you do ad-based kind of revenue.
All right. Let's use this as a segue into another story that's related, and that is specifically talking about Java on the desktop, on a laptop platform. Now, Java is still going to be needed, or at least understanding it, if you're going to be doing any sort of programming for Android. But it wasn't too long ago, Lou, that people started saying, wait a minute, why do I need Java at all? Why do I have to install this? And one of the things that actually gave Java more life on the desktop and a laptop was Minecraft, because Minecraft does use Java. At least it did until recently. We've got a story here about how Java is now going to be including its own runtime environment. So, Minecraft, so that you're not going to have to install that Java package. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so what they've done is they've broken apart the Java runtime in a way that they don't expose a lot of the surfaces that have security holes. So like, for instance, the browser integration, right? Today you can go into Chrome or IE or Safari and be able to build out the Java runtime, be able to have an app that's in the browser. But with this new version that they've kind of broken apart, and they actually ship with their launcher, the Minecraft launcher, it's broken and broken apart to not have or include the browser component. So that means that the security surface area where a lot of the malware came from or comes from is actually reduced almost to nothing. And so that really helps them not only ship that, but they helps them control what type of things go in it. So if there's maybe a patch to it that might create a security hole, they can control that rollout a little bit more. Plus, they can control the performance of it. So, like, for instance, what people are seeing on the new version of this runtime that they're shipping is, like, on 32-bit versions, they're actually seeing a performance increase, like load time and bootstrap time. And then also, like, for instance, on the 64-bit version, they're actually seeing frame rate increase. So, like, they can control the performance as well. So not only can they control the security hole capability or possibilities, but they can also control the performance, which is truly a manufacturing capability when somebody breaks apart the runtime and not ships Java itself.
Right. And that idea of integrating it into the launcher for that specific program, for Minecraft, and then optimizing it for just the parts of the environment that Minecraft's going to need, I mean, naturally, yeah, that's going to lead to performance increases. But then I'm wondering, Lou, how feasible is it to do that for other applications that may require Java? I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? Everyone has run an application at one time or another, and it says, well, I need the Java runtime environment to be able to do this, and so they install the entire package. What's to keep some of the larger players from saying, no, I'm going to go the Minecraft route, and I'm just going to give you what you need out of the environment so that you don't have to include that bloated package?
Really, have you seen from like Android, nothing really stops you from building out your own version of the runtime. You know, even a lot of big players today, like Microsoft Corporation, making the CLR or the runtime kind of open source. I mean, these types of things are capable of doing on these different platforms. So nothing really stops a manufacturer. They just have to take the time to understand how the runtime works and the valid components that they need. So, do they need the bootstrapping component? They need the memory manager. They need all these things, right? They need the JIT compiler, all of this stuff. And so they need to understand the components that they need. So Minecraft took a lot of time to build this out and to understand how it works in order to make it better for their customers. And I think that's very admirable if you think about it. I mean, that's really what companies should be doing.
Right. Right. Well, when we come back, we're going to be switching gears a little bit. We've been talking Arduino for the last couple of weeks, but now we want to jump into the Raspberry Pi and some Python. I'm bringing back an old guest, someone who was here on one of the very first episodes of Coding 101. Liam Kennedy will be dropping in to talk about ISS Above. It's a Raspberry Pi project that he created to help people who are interested in space. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the first sponsor of Coding 101. Now, let me ask you something. Do you want a presence on the internet? Well, of course you do. I mean, you kind of have to, be it for business or for personal reasons. Everyone's got that great idea or that great picture or those great portfolios that you want to show off. Everyone has some sort of event that they would like people to know about. Well, you could use social media. That's a good call. But you could also find yourself a spot to play on the web. And that's where Squarespace comes into play. Now, Squarespace is the easy way for you to create a professional website, blog, or online store. It features an elegant interface, beautiful templates, and incredible, and I really do mean incredible, 24/7 customer support who will guide you through all those nasty questions about interface and programming. Now, one of the things about Squarespace, and this is the reason why I refer them to the organizations I work with, who typically aren't all that tech savvy, is it's good for an expert. If you know coding already, if you're an HTML wizard, if you know cascading style sheets in your sleep, well, you can use that knowledge. But if you don't, and all you want is to get an idea into the public in a way that looks good, well, Squarespace is for you. It's simple, it's powerful, and it's beautiful. And in Squarespace 7, making changes is clearer and simpler than ever because they have a preview window that will show you in real time what your changes are doing to the appearance of your site. It's also incredibly easy to use. As I mentioned before, they have 24/7 help. So if you run into a problem, you're going to be able to get someone in chat who can tell you where you have to go next. Squarespace also starts at just $8 a month, so it's not going to break the bank. And they take care of hosting so that you don't have to. Plus, you get a free domain if you buy Squarespace for a year. All Squarespace websites are responsive, and they scale to look great on any device, which is great if you are wondering about how your site's going to look on a desktop or a laptop or a phone or a tablet. Squarespace takes care of all of that in the back end. You give them the content, and they'll present it in the best way possible. Now, e-commerce is available. Every website comes with a free online store if that's what you want to do. And with cover pages, you can set up a beautiful one-page online presence in minutes. It's perfect for creating quick landing pages for your brand, your personal identity, or to promote a new product. Now, here's what we want you to do. We want you to start a new trial with no credit card required and start building your website today. When you sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code C101 to get 10% off your first purchase. We thank Squarespace for their support of Coding 101. Squarespace, build it beautiful. And we thank Squarespace for their support of Coding 101. We welcome back to the show entrepreneur and I'd just say coding geek, Mr. Liam Kennedy. Liam, thank you very much for coming back onto Coding 101.
Thank you so much for having me. Really pleased to be here.
It's been about a year since we last had you on, you know, we also had you on one of these wild card episodes that we do. I mean, this is one of the things that we decided to do with Coding 101 at the beginning, which is we have our episodes, our modules that are heavy on the coding, heavy on the programming, and then we have these, which are sort of, well, what else goes into creating a programmer? And you, my friend, are a big part of that because you just decided one day you were going to make something.
I did. I just decided to make it for my grandkids, a little device that lit up when the space station came over, and did the Kickstarter last January, finished February, that funded, and since then I've shipped over 850. They're all around the world. It's been a wonderful experience, not least because I've managed to go to NASA several times and meet like the future commander of the space station, Scott Kelly. And it all happened because I'm a geek. It's just great.
Which is what we love. Now, Liam, if you could explain the idea of ISS Above real quickly. And in fact, Brian, if you go to my overhead shot right now, this is what one of the very early modules looked. This was the very first one you ever gave to us. And inside, it's just a Raspberry Pi. I think this was the original Raspberry Pi. It's not even the B edition.
That's, yeah, no, I think that is the B, but it's not the B+.
Right.
So, and yeah, that case was 3D printed as part of the Kickstarter as well. So what you basically got there is the basic fundamental Raspberry Pi Model B, and it's got the Pi Glow. That's that little add-on that's sitting on the GPIO ports. All that does is just light up when the space station comes over. It also tells you how long it is until the space station comes over. So it's a really simple device, the initial version. The code, I wrote it all in Python, and it's sitting on that SD card that's just plugged in there.
Right.
So it was a very simple project for me to put there, but it actually involved a lot of different moving parts because there's also a website on there. I had to make it easy for people to see detailed information about the passes. So you'd never believe it, but yeah, on that little Raspberry Pi, it's running a web server. It's also doing all the calculations on the device itself. It's not like going out to some website to pull the data down. It's actually calculating it. And that was just the first version. You know, the new version that I've been shipping for a few months now, actually you can see some of the screens behind me here. It now plugs into a TV. It seems pretty silly that it didn't do that initially when I realized just what you could do with Python on the Pi. So you can see some of the screens switching through. In fact, I think if I switch over to this is me switching. So you can see details about the next pass. So you can see that the next one is in just 56 minutes. This screen shows the path across the sky, but it's hardly rising above the above the horizon. If you can see, there's a little yellow line across the western side of the screen there. And then it shows the orbit. So, you know, this is all done using Pygame, which is a popular library for Python that allows you to easily bring in graphics and do, you know, light animations, which is what I'm doing on it.
Right.
And the amazing thing as well, on top of that, is now it supports live video. So whenever the space station is in sunlight, which unfortunately it isn't right now. Oh, we're showing the expedition crew there. So whenever the space station is in sunlight, there are cameras on the space station that are active, and you get to see live video from the space station, wherever that is. So that's really half of each orbit. So every 46 minutes for the next 46 minutes, it's in sunlight, and you'll get to see those live views. And I don't know, I just think it's amazing that the Raspberry Pi can do all of that. Something that you may be interested in is I do have, in fact, the version that I've got running today is running on a Pi 2, and that does have significant improvements in CPU utilization. So when on the previous Pi, it would run pretty much full CPU usage, 95%, but on the new version, it drops that down to 8% when it's running the videos.
Wow,
so
that gives you a lot more headroom to do
it
things.
really does. I was beginning to sort of look for other ways to push the limits of what I was getting ISS Above to do. Now I don't have to.
Liam, one of the reasons why it was absolutely great to have you on a year ago was because as we were starting our programming modules, one of the things that a lot of the novices in our Google Plus group were expressing was how daunting programming was. That, you know, they started and they'd start with our lessons, they'd learn a couple of loops, they'd learn how to push output and take an input from the user. But then when they started seeing how complicated some of these programs were, they would just shake their heads and say, I'm never going to be able to do that. And you were the first guest to come on and really show us what we could do with libraries. We could just import large swaths of code. And you yourself, you were mentioning how, yeah, I brought these packages in, and then I would just experiment. I tinkered to make them work right. And you came up with the formula to figure out exactly where the ISS was in its orbit. Is that the same? I mean, have you had to do much more to expand the capabilities of your new version? Because obviously, just blinking a light is a lot different than now being able to stream feeds as the ISS is above.
Yeah, I know it. Sort of, when I look at it now, it does look a very complicated program, and it does have a lot of moving parts. But I did it exactly the way that you recalled how I said it. I just bite off small chunks at a time. Just literally, I want to see how I can display an image using Pygame, so I just do that.
Can you show us that? How did you display images using Pygame?
Okay, let me switch over to my screen over here and bring that up. Okay, so yeah, this is the right screen. So I'm gonna, and do you remember I described myself as?
We're still getting the ISS above.
Let me do that. Okay, there we go. Now you got it. Right, so you should be able to see the screen now. So if you can see what's going on right here, it's my spaghetti code. So unfortunately, it's going to be still really tough to sort of take you through all of this. But Believe you me, these are some of the things that you do using Pygame. You just simply call some functions. Here I'm drawing a circle, and
those are just coordinates. Yeah. So
yeah,
you're calling a method that will give it at 192.192.192, and then it just draws itself.
Yeah. So I think this is a color, an RGB color attribute, and then this is the actual center and center Y, the radius, the width of the line. It's pretty much just messing around. So that's how to draw a circle using Pygame. I'm doing other things, drawing lines. Again, very much a similar type of way of doing things.
Now, Liam, I got to ask you, as you were tinkering around with this, did you just start coding different shapes on the screen and hopefully come up with something that you want? Or did you actually draw it down and then figure out the code that you would need to make it?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, do I really come clean here? So it was a mixture of the two. Some of it was, in fact, I really had trouble trying to figure out how to get the fonts to do what I wanted it to do, because it's pretty arbitrary as far as figuring out what the locations are of things. So I would just experiment. And, like, for instance, if I just switch back here, let me just switch back to the right screen. If I just switch back here, you can see that I'm displaying the text at a particular location, and I basically calculate I store previously a set of columns and lines, which are really just coordinates, where I'm going to display the text in a particular font. And when I first started out, I hard-coded everything, and that's typically, just the way that I go through it, just to make sure I know how things work. And then I just improve it through iteration. So, that's sort of how I started out with it. And this was just one aspect of the new coding that I got into using Pygame. It was obviously important for displaying to the HDMI monitor, but then there was also the way of using a really cool tool called Live Streamer on the Raspberry Pi to display videos really over the top of these screens.
Right.
And that was again something where I just started out experimenting with things and eventually found a library that really sort of did what I wanted it to do. For instance, I started out, if I just show you this one here, I'm just going to go back to this screen. What I'm showing you is just a terminal command set up to one of my Pis, and I just wanted to figure out how to play videos, and I started out using the inbuilt player, which probably many people have used on a Raspberry Pi, and I just simply, force it to, oh, there we go. Let me go into the right directory and just play this video. And you'll see, this is playing out that video through the Raspberry Pi. Now, what this was showing me is that I could easily play videos that were locally on the system, but it wouldn't actually allow me to display the NASA video stream, their live video stream, which is through Ustream. So, and that's when I found this this tool called the Live Streamer. And that's what I've implemented into this environment. It basically means anyone with a Raspberry Pi can stream live Ustream videos, including Twit.
Right.
It's a really great way of doing it.
Yeah.
So
there are folks in the chat room who are wondering how they get a hold of this code. Well, okay, this is the thing. This is Liam's code. He actually sells the ISS Above, and he has shipped quite a few. But what we're hoping to show you is these packages, Pygame and the streamer. You can get that now. Those are publicly available. We'll make sure that links to those packages are available in the show notes, so that if you wanted to start playing around with that and maybe create your own solution based on Python on the Pi, that's absolutely going to be easy for you. Let me bring in my co-host here, Liam, for just a second. Lou, this is a different kind of programming than you would be used to in your office. I mean, Microsoft has a definite dev process where you will go from everything from the hierarchy of the software to exactly what it's going to be using, and you'll divide up the program into different departments, and everyone will be responsible for their own little part. This is homebrew. Let's be honest. This is a homebrew computer club. Do you do any of this? And do you see a correlation with what you do for work?
You know what I love that what Liam's done is he's found the ability to not only provide a service, but he's providing it on a piece of hardware that he's developed, right? So a little bit of Raspberry Pi and some other functional components to it. And the key to that is he's kind of melded the two worlds where when you do a cloud service, you can ship it really quickly and then incrementally fix it and update it over as you go along. But he's done it on a piece of hardware, and so that's really tough to do if you think about it. So I commend him for doing that. I think it's what a lot of large companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Google are trying to do is ship something very quickly that might have some real value, but then slowly increment and update it and go along and add more value to it as you go along. And so that's a really tough thing to do. So I commend him for that. And yeah, daily we try to figure that out at Microsoft, how to do that really well. So I mean, that's really something that's hard to do.
Yeah, when was the last time you worked on a dev team of one? It's probably been a while.
This morning.
I don't think there's that one person you could point to and say, oh yeah, he made Windows 8. Of course, far more complicated, but yeah.
Well, maybe David Cutler might say he'd done that, right?
Yes, and actually, that's a secret. We're working on that. Liam, let me get you back in here. Last time we had a lot of Uber props thrown your way when you showed the folks at home the formula that you had to sort of hard crack in order to figure out when and where to display the ISS. Has that changed at all? Can you show us that code?
Yeah, no. So just to be clear on that one, what I had to calculate was the visual magnitude of it when it's visible, because there wasn't. I couldn't find an equation that would really allow me to figure out the angles that I needed to figure out in order to determine how bright the space station is when it's going to be visible. So that was the code I wrote. The code that actually does the calculations, the hard calculations, is done through another library called PyFM. So I'll show you that right here. Before I do you mind if I just mention one thing, and that's what I'm holding in my hand here. I do have a new Kickstarter going on, and it's designed. It actually bridges Arduino with Raspberry Pi. It's actually a really perfect segue between your previous show. So I've actually worked with a local designer in Pasadena, a DIY electronics firm called Acrobotic, and they developed this custom little device here, which is an RF Arduino. It has a Bluetooth LED chip on it and a real-time clock, and you can sew it onto this this wearable thing here, and it basically gets 50 passes of the ISS, or up to 50 passes written onto it whenever it turns on. So you just plug it into a micro USB power type adapter, and away it goes. So we're about halfway through the campaign right now. I see you're sort of showing the stuff there with 40 backers. So hopefully this is a bit of an unusual type of add-on. And as well as that, I've also supported these. I've got a new custom Pi hat that I'm holding up here that actually supports really long LED strips as well. So if that little Pi glow isn't sufficient for your environment, you can have what's going on behind me over here on the screen with the strip behind me. And it's either remote or with a Pi hat directly into the actual Raspberry Pi. So that's my little plug for my own little Kickstarter that's going on right now. So hopefully you didn't mind that I did that. And all the details there on the Kickstarter. So a very good start to it. And I happen to know this is a real big hit for kids in school, because when I was in the UK for a couple of weeks, I traveled to my grandkids' school and gave a presentation to, in one case, 200 very interested and very inspiring young students, and they just couldn't get over this wearable ISS Above. They all wanted to have one. It was really fun.
Yeah. Liam, before we jump into your code, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the second sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. Oh, this is a sponsor that I kind of hold dear, because they do exactly what I need them to do, and that is business communications. Now, when you think of the tools that you use to communicate today, there's a bunch that come to mind. There's text, there's phone, there's email, there's every sort of tool in social media. But the question is it good for business? Does it keep your team in sync? Does it keep everyone on the same page? Because that's what a good business communications tool will do, which is why we're happy to have HipChat as a sponsor of Coding 101. They ask a very simple question, and that is, how is your team communicating? Are they using email, IM, texting, cloud storage, and document sharing apps in just sort of a hodgepodge of solutions? Well, they don't have to do that, because HipChat puts everything in one place, and it's designed for business. By putting IM, video chat, document sharing, screen sharing, system updates, code sharing, all in one simple platform that also keeps track of the history of communications. So if you ever need to step back in time to figure out why a certain change was made or why a team went off in one direction, you'll have it right there in your communications tool. Now, email is too slow. Meetings get sidetracked, and regular IM, well, it just really doesn't work well for business groups. But HipChat keeps your team in sync, and it will work from any device, no matter where you are or what you're using. Best part, HipChat integrates with the top developer tools like GitHub, Jira, Zendesk, and more. You can check out the 57 services that HipChat plays nice with. It brings your entire project and team communications together. And isn't really that what we want out of our communications tool? It's easy to use, it's easy to set up, and it makes your team wildly productive. We use it here at the Twit Brickhouse because with all the shows we do and all the interplay between the hosts and the engineers, the TDs, and the staff, we need to stay on the same page. Well, that's what HipChat lets us do. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to get your team on the same page in seconds. There's a freemium version that you can use free forever, but for the next 30 days, you get the full version of HipChat, which includes the bonus features of video and screen sharing. You can try HipChat free, no credit card required. Visit hipchat.com/C101. Sign up, click on the Start Chatting button, then invite a few team members and try it free for 30 days. And for the first 100 signups, HipChat is going to extend their 30-day free offer to 90 days. Remember, that's hipchat.com/C101. hipchat.com/C101. HipChat, your team, your project, in sync instantly. And we thank HipChat for their support of Coding 101. Liam, lay it on us. What does this look like when you need to figure out whether or not you can actually see the ISS above?
Yeah, so let's do this. So what I've got on the screen here is the really simple piece of code. It's actually this one line here that actually calculates when the next pass of the ISS is over your particular location. Now, I'm not showing you all the code, but essentially what's going on here, it's using the library PyFM. That's very easy to get. There's even example code out there that you can see. Just install the PyFM library, and what you basically do is you set this object, which is the observer, i.e. you, wherever you are, with the latitude, longitude, and the date time that you're currently at. And then this little function here gets called, and it figures out the next pass of this little object, which is the ISS object, which I previously set elsewhere in the code as well. The way you do that is you just set the ISS to a particular satellite it's called two-line element. It's where you can define the orbital elements. It's very easy to get those online for the International Space Station. And with this one piece of code, that basically gives you the time rise, the time of the next rise of the space station in your sky, what angle it will be at, that's the azimuth rise, so which compass direction it will be on, northwest, southwest. This is the time of the transit, that's the highest point in the sky. And this is when it is at that highest point, how high will it be? So, is it going to be 60 degrees, 30 degrees, 5 degrees, whatever? And then over here, it tells you when it's going to set, the time set, and then which direction it will be when it sets. And that's pretty much all the code, apart from setting the observer and setting the pass, that is involved here. So you can see it's very easy to actually calculate that. And the things that I've added on are really just the bits that allow you to easily get updates to the two-line elements. Because despite the fact that the Raspberry Pi is obviously something that's popular with makers, interestingly, or counterintuitively, the vast majority of users of ISS Above are actually not makers. They're actually people who just want to get a device, plug it in, switch it on, and they have mission control for the space station on their own TV. So consequently, I'm giving you the under-the-covers view of it, but while there are definitely Raspberry Pi enthusiasts and makers who get this, that's why I've got a download version. So, and just so as you know, the download version usually lists for $30, but for Coding 101 people or anyone who happens to stumble across the Coding 101 episode, if you just put Coding 101 as the discount code, you can get it down to $15. It's not free, obviously, but then hopefully you'll get an understanding of just how much effort goes into this to create something that is really usable by anyone.
Oh, well, we'll talk about that in just a bit. I do want to get Lou back in here. Lou, this is an interesting project. Again, it's very different from what we normally do in Coding 101 because most of our projects are from the start to the finish. They're made for people who kind of want to progress a bit more. As Liam said, this is a weird maker DIYer plus project. Where do you rate this? As far as building up your repository of programming knowledge, where would you rate doing something like an ISS Above with the Raspberry Pi, or even the last module that we did, doing the Arduino steampunk clock?
I mean, I would rate this as one of those, even though it's a do-it-yourself, I think it definitely brings the knowledge of embedded programming and kind of getting you used to those types of development environments, and then deploying it and testing it and verifying it, and even built the UI with it. So I mean, this would be a great example, I think, of starting out. Some of the projects seem like they're a little bit too complex, but it doesn't matter. I mean, this still gets your hands dirty with these platforms. And it's not that these other platforms are any more difficult than the next. I mean, once you start to get used to them, it's a little easier to kind of adapt. And I think, get your hands in there, get your hands dirty, and just start playing with it. And always have a purpose. And in this case, he had a purpose. He had a reason to build these and to deploy and to give you data. And if you do the same with your simple apps, you'll always build out something really neat.
Now, I got to ask you something, Liam, because I'm going to receive heat if I don't throw this question at you. This is a little storm that's been going on in the chat room, but there's going to be those people who, they see something like the ISS Above, which is, by the way, it's one of the very first things that I wanted on Coding 101, again, because I thought it was such a neat project, who are going to say, wait a minute, he's using code that's under GPL, and he's selling code that he's modified, including those modules he's taken from the GPL. What is your take on that? I mean, I know you've heard this before, and personally I support you. I believe that programmers who put their time and effort into creating something should be able to receive some sort of monetary compensation. But if someone were to come up to you and say, no, give me all your code now because you have to, what would you say?
Yeah, well, I'd answer that in one way, which is, yeah, it's I'm using, as I think many companies do, there are open source modules that are integrated into many systems that are sold commercially. So I chose not to make this open source because of really the nature of where I see this as going. It's something that is, I'm supplying it mostly to people who really just want something that works. And then I've got to make sure that I do the effort to make sure that it's reliable, it's updatable. By the way, you do update it using a web interface as well. So I've got all of that going on. But on the other hand, yes, I guess I've got to say it is in the back of my mind as well. I agree with you. It's one of those things where in the back of my mind, yes, I'm saying, well, I'm using PyFM, which is free. You know, it's free because other people in the open source community have created it. I would say, you know, the way I'm justifying it, and it's simply the way I'm justifying it, it's not right, it's not the correct answer, but it's just my view on it, is that there are, you know, a number of different ways in which products are developed and they're brought to market, and sometimes they utilize open source components, and yet they're still free. Sorry, they're still there's still something where the actual developer of that particular expression, that particular project is something that people pay money for. And also think of this. So there are often hardware components that are used on top of an open source environment, like that PyGlow, you know, like other things that are hardware that go on top of it. Why is it okay to charge for hardware and yet not for software and the effort it goes to do it? So again, I'm not sort of saying I'm right in this, and I do really appreciate everyone who has an opinion one way or another on this, and that's sort of really where I'm coming from.
Understood. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much, both of you, Lou and Liam, for being on this episode. I'm afraid we are going to have to start closing it up. But, you know, again, Liam, it's always a pleasure to have you on. It's always a pleasure to talk about the projects that you're working on. Could you please tell the folks where they can find you? They already know where they can find your Kickstarter program, and they already know where they can download the software. But if they want to find out what you've been tinkering with the past couple of weeks, where's a good place for them to drop by?
That's a good question. I obviously have a Twitter account, ISS Above You, although that's mostly filled with tweets from the 850 ISS Aboves out there. I do have a another Twitter account, just Liam Kennedy. So at Liam Kennedy, you'll find me there. And I'll be sure to, you know, post updates to what I'm up to on that, and also on my website on issabove.com.
Liam Kennedy, the creator of ISS Above. We thank you for being on the show, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Lou Maresca, again, lead developer for Microsoft. He is a man who's been with the show actually literally since the first episode, and it's nice that I get to work with you more or less on a weekly basis. Of course, people are going to know that they'll find you here on the Twit TV network. In fact, it's not just Coding 101 or Twiet, but we are going to have you on Before You Buy very, very soon. Now, if people wanted to know what you've been tinkering with, where do they find you on the internet?
Well, definitely check out my Twitter stream, LouMM, L-O-U-M-M. And of course, all my daily work that I do during the day that I get paid dearly for is at crm.dynamics.com.
Well, yeah, getting paid is important. We just talked about this. And folks, I want to thank everyone, all of you who tune in each and every single week to Coding 101. Now, I know that this was a Code Light show. In fact, we're going to have another Code Light show. It's what we've been doing since the very beginning. We give people a chance to catch up between the intense modules. We just finished the Arduino module, so naturally, we're going to have 2 interview shows before we dive back in. I will say we are going to hit it pretty heavy. We've got some C# coming back on, some Perl coming back on. And then in April, we've got a month-long of Ruby and Ruby on Rails. So if you are interested in doing anything in that space, you're definitely going to want to mark that on your calendar. Remember, April is Ruby month and Rails. Go figure. I also want to thank everyone here who makes this show possible. There's a lot of people who go into making Coding 101 what it is. Of course, there's Lisa and Leo who let us do the show, but there's also the staff, the continuity, the engineers, and of course, my friend, my TD, and my co-host, Mr. Brian Burnett, also known as the Cranky Hippo. I don't know if he has a camera on himself. Normally he does.
I was ready. I knew you were going to talk. Okay. Hey, that's Brian, a good introduction. Thanks, Padre.
Where can they find you?
They can find me on the Thursdays doing Know How with you. I also am on Twitter at cranky_hippo. And so we sometimes go back and forth on there. I think one of the more recent things we've been talking about is your obsession with Homeworld. So if there are any fans of that old game that came out in 1999, you might want to thumb through Padre's Twitter because
I can't believe you got me addicted to that again. Every time I get out, they pull me back in.
It wasn't that difficult. You watched me play it once, and you already had a fleet strategy. So, yeah, you can catch me there and do a know-how with Padre. Having lots of fun.
Well, if you don't want to watch us playing Homeworld, you could also download the old modules of Coding 101. You can always find that at our show page at twit.tv/code or Coding 101. It all goes to the same place. While you're in that page, there also is a space where you can automatically subscribe to every episode. That's right, get every episode in your device of choice. Do you want the audio versions in your iPhone? Do you want the video versions on your tablet? Do you want the high-def versions on your laptop or your PC so you could watch it at home? Well, we'll do that for you because we love you. Also, we do this show live every week, Mondays at 2:30 Pacific time. That's right, it's switched from its previous Thursday time slot. And if you're watching live, why not jump into our chat room at irc.twit.tv. There you'll be able to see what the people of chat room are saying. In fact, I can see you guys right down here. I get to pull questions and see whether or not we're covering the material that you want. So if you want a Coding 101 that is more suited to you, that's a great place to do it. Finally, you can find me on Twitter. Just follow me at twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's at PadreSJ. If you go there, you'll find out what I'm doing for all of my shows, for Coding 101, for Know How, for Padre's Corner, for Before You Buy, for This Week in Enterprise Tech. I make sure to list my episodes and my topics there. So if you want to see what I'm doing on Twit, that's a great place to go. And it's also a good place to go if you want to find out what I'm doing when I'm not on Twit, like asking Cranky Hippo to fix my computer when Homeworld was taking forever to download. There we go. Absolutely. Until next time. Now that we have violated copyright, I'm Father Robert Balaser, the Digital Jesuit. This has been Coding 101. End of line.